Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the lecture from Dr. Kallu. I think most of us in the industry know Dr. Kallur. I don't think we need introduction to Sir. He's doing a lot more work than what we are going to hear today on therapy and PET-CT, new traces, you name it. The new technology is the first one to bring lots of technology to our country. And we are very lucky to have the lecture from wherever we are sitting. We are going to hear lots of insights on use of isotopes in common thyroid disorders. So I welcome Dr. Kallu to present us the lecture on common isotopes used in thyroid disorder. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, my dear colleagues, friends. What I am going to talk is very basic about thyroid isotope imaging. Thyroid disorder is the one which is all of us will come across in our day-to-day practice, and there is a plethora of investigations available to you to diagnose various disorders pertaining to the thyroid gland. But many of you may be using a thyroid isotope imaging and many of you may not be using it. So what I am going to talk is very basic, which you can use in your day-to-day practice, how a nuclear medicine imaging or a thyroid isotope imaging is useful. So what I am going to talk is pathophysiological basis of imaging of a different thyroid illnesses. So the thyroid gland was the first one to be imaged by nuclear medicine using isotopes long back, 1940s. So the technology has evolved. There was a lot of worry about in the general public that because we use isotope it is deleterious to the health and all. It is not so anymore. There is no hazard by any nuclear medicine imaging today. So the thyroid scintigraphy is based on the specific phase of a thyroid hormone synthesis. When we inject isotope, it is incorporated into the synthesis of the hormones, and something goes wrong during disease process of the thyroid, and based on that we are able to tell what may be the problem with the thyroid physiology. So thyroid scintigraphy is actually, it represents the function of the gland. It will not give exquisite anatomical details like a CT scan or MRI scan or ultrasound scan. The information you are asking from a nuclear medicine specialist is about the function. No doubt with the advent of better nuclear imaging scanners now, we can give reasonably good quality anatomical images also. So how we do it? What is the technique? In our country, we use basically two isotopes. One is technetium isotope, another is iodine-131. Iodine-131 is incorporated in the hormone synthesis, so it is well suited to study all the pathophysiological problems of the thyroid gland. But what happens, we have to inject and call the patients next day or up to 48 hours, sometimes up to 72 hours. It is not feasible for a patient who is coming to the center from far off place. So most of centers we use, which is analog of iodine-131, it is a technetium 99M. We inject, and usually we can finish the whole procedure within 20 to 30 minutes, and we can give reasonably good information about the function of the thyroid gland vis-a-vis iodine-131. So typically we inject about 5 millicurie of technetium, 3 to 5 millicurie, and in pediatric patients we might inject even less, maybe a few hundred microcuries, maybe 500, 600 microcurie for infant, up to 1 millicurie for a child. And when we administer iodine-131, it's typically around 25 to 50 microcuries, and it can be administered orally. So this is how typically we do a scan. There can be some centers have thyroid uptake probe, and most of the centers use a gamma camera like this, and this is a different collimator. It will give information. The patient is positioned like this, and this will identify the image, the isotope information or the radiation coming from the thyroid gland, and it is seen in the image form. So isotopes can give some information about the anatomy also. So we all know thyroid gland develops from foramen cecum of the tongue and it descends down, and something can go wrong during the descent, during the development. It can be stuck there only, or it can go below the sternum into the mediastinum, and because of that the patients can manifest with certain problems, clinical problems. So isotope scan can be used to identify the ectopic gland also. And this is how a typical thyroid gland looks. You can see a uniform uptake in both the lobes of the thyroid gland, on par with the salivary glands, and slightly more than the background activity, background surrounding soft tissue. This is the typical picture of a thyroid gland. And as I told you, during development, the thyroid is descending from foramen cecum and it can get stuck somewhere. And this is what happens. This is thyroid gland is not visualized in its anatomical position in the neck. It is seen in the sublingual position. So these are the cases usually referred to us by pediatricians when they suspect that the child may be having frank hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism, or sometimes they put a tongue depressor to see something and they see a globular structure on the base of the tongue. They suspect that it may be sublingual thyroid, and they refer for to see where is the anatomical position of the thyroid gland, and this is very easy to do, and we will see it like this sublingual thyroid gland. And this is an example where there is a developmental anomaly, expected anatomical position in the neck, it is not seen. The entire thyroglossal cyst or thyroglossal tract is actually the thyroid gland. You are not seeing other two lobes nicely here, and this is a development anomaly. And whenever there is a development anomaly like this, another example of sublingual thyroid, usually there is not enough space for it to grow, so it is small, so it is not functioning fully, and usually these patients have either frank hypothyroid or subclinical hypothyroid. So this is how a thyroid isotope scan will help you in your day-to-day practice to identify what may be the cause of a hypothyroid status in your child. And sometimes during this, the thyroglossal tract may remain and it may transform in the form of a cyst. And in midline swelling, the differential diagnosis can be dermoid cyst, it can be lymph node, it can be sebaceous cyst, schwannoma, lymphatic malformations. And if you are suspecting that it could be a thyroid, you have to consider a thyroid scan. And sometimes the thyroid can descend into the mediastinum. Here thyroid is not seen in an expected anatomical position in the neck, it is in the mediastinum with lot of calcification there. So this is how an isotope scan will help to identify where is the actual thyroid located, is it of a normal size, how is its function, and why. And you might have suspected a thyroglossal cyst. Clinically, ultrasound, okay, you have diagnosed, but you want to operate it, better consider a thyroid isotope scan before you consider a surgery, because that may be the only thyroid functioning tissue in this patient. Example here, you can see a midline swelling and there is no normal thyroid structure there, and whatever swelling is seen is maybe that is the only thyroid functioning gland there. And nowadays, good thing is that immediately after the childbirth, a lot of tests are done and screening tests happen for the infant. They do a blood test to evaluate the thyroid function, and in case there is a high TSH, then you have to aggressively see what is the problem with the child. Otherwise, unfortunately, a child can have a unfortunate clinical scenario like a cretinism. So what you want to do in a neonate with a high TSH, you want to see whether a thyroid has developed or not. If it is developed, whether it is in its anatomical position or in ectopic position. So we get a lot of patients from neonatologists when they do a screening for thyroid, and when high TSH is there, isotope scan is done. And just to give an example here, 1 month-old child, infant, TSH is high, I've done a technetium scan, there is no thyroid in this child. This is thyroid agenesis. And in this case, we call them very next day also, administer very tiny dose of iodine also, and there is nothing in the neck. No thyroid gland is visualized, and whatever little activity you are seeing is the activity in the oral cavity. It is not a thyroid gland. Another example of a 6-week-old infant, male child, high TSH. Here what has happened? The thyroid looks bigger for this child. Uptake is there. Definitely it is more uptake compared to surrounding soft tissue and salivary glands. And we know it, we call it as the TSH effect. Child is definitely hypothyroid. So what we have ruled out in this case is there is no thyroid ectopia. Thyroid is present. Oogenesis is also ruled out. So there may be some problem with the child in the hormone synthesis. It may be trapping isotope, but it is not finally producing a hormone. It is called as a thyroid dysharmonogenesis. Another example here, 4-year-old child, high TSH, thyroid gland is seen in its expected anatomical position, almost normal uptake. It is not correlating with the high TSH. So what is the problem here? There is organification defect in the thyroid gland. So many of the neonatologists or endocrinologists will inquire to do what is called a dysharmonogenesis test. Isotope uptake is there. It is taking up iodine, but it is not converted into hormone in a sufficient quantity. There is some physiological defect there. So how to identify that? So we administer iodine, there is a lot of uptake here. Here we are not seeing the image of the thyroid gland. We are only showing the uptake here. And it is, we give a competitor for iodine uptake there, we give what is called as perchlorate. If there is organification, there is no organification defect, the isotope should remain like that. If that perchlorate washes out the iodine trapping, you can see from 30% it has washed out to 11% within 2 hours. That means there is no trapping is happening, but no organification going on. So this is a classical example of a dysharmonogenesis. Another example here, we were requested to evaluate a dysharmonogenesis. Thyroid uptake is 2.2%. After perchlorate uptake, washout is not there, it has remained same. So we have ruled out a dysharmonogenesis in this child. Another example here, a 10-year-old female, clinically hypothyroid. There was a palpable swelling in the neck. So we have done a thyroid scan. Why we have done a thyroid scan? We wanted to know what is wrong with any anatomy or why it is hypothyroid. In this case, you are not seeing the left lobe, right lobe is enlarged and it is slightly higher up. It is ectopic also. You are seeing a pyramidal lobe or thyroglossal tract there, that is also showing some uptake. The uptake is generally more than surrounding soft tissue. So this is a classical hypothyroid feature. And it is anomaly also. There is hemioogenesis. There is no left lobe in this child. Another example, 37-year-old male, hypothyroid. So we have done a thyroid scan just to see what anatomy in this patient. Right lobe is not seen at all. You are seeing only the left lobe. Uptake is very high. This because of TSH effect, there is increased uptake. So whenever there is a reduced volume of the thyroid gland, they can always manage because it may not be able to meet the demand of a hormone T3, T4 in the body. So these patients might present to you with a hypothyroid status. Here, 71-year-old female, thyroid function is clearly suggesting to a clinician that it is a hyperthyroid gland and he requests for a thyroid scan. Here uptake is more. It is a classical uniformly increased uptake compared to surrounding soft tissue and salivary glands. This is a classical picture of a Graves' disease. Now, listening to my talk, you might have wondered both hypothyroid status and in Graves' disease, both uptake are same. I am giving you an example here. On your left, 21-year-old female, TSH is high, uptake is more. On the right side, TSH is low and uptake is high. So based only on the image, can we tell with a technetium isotope, if you give me two pictures, can anyone tell it is hypothyroid status or a Graves' disease? No, we cannot. So we have to go through the clinical details. So I request all the clinicians to furnish to your nuclear medicine guy the T3, T4 values so that he can, looking at those two values, he can give a better picture of a pathophysiology, why the uptake is more in these patients. Or when this feature, the data is not available, we usually call the patients, administer iodine, and we call them next day, and in a hypothyroid status, iodine uptake will not be there. And hyperfunctioning gland. You will come across in your day-to-day practice typical thyrotoxicosis patients. Now you have to differentiate because your management is based on what type of a thyrotoxicosis this patient has. Is it a Graves' disease? Is it thyroiditis? Is it a multinodular goiter? Is it a toxic nodule? How do you see? So ultrasound will give you a picture, but it will not give you a lot of additional information. What may be the type of gland here? Why the hyperthyroid function is thyroid gland is functioning more? So here, this is an example: low TSH, classical features, clinical features of hyperthyroidism. The technetium isotope scan shows uniform tracer uptake, typical butterfly appearance, and this is a classical picture of a Graves' disease. Here, patient is hyperthyroid. You are seeing only one nodule which is functioning more. Rest of the thyroid gland is suppressed. This is toxic nodule or autonomous nodule, and it has suppressed rest of the glands, function of the rest of the gland. This is how now you know if your patient has come to you, why the patient is hyperthyroid, what is the different type here. It is a hyperthyroidism because of the toxic nodule. Because these pictures will tell you to manage these patients in a different manner. I will come to that later. Example here, patient had a palpable nodule, hyperthyroid clinically. Thyroid scan shows one hot nodule here replacing entire right lobe. Rest of the thyroid gland, left lobe is not visualized at all. It is because it is suppressed by autonomous nodule here. This is another example where you are seeing varied pattern. Generalized increased uptake is there throughout the gland, but you are seeing multiple other cold nodules. This is a classical multinodular toxic goiter. So this is another example of thyrotoxicosis where now I have shown you typical Graves, I have shown you toxic nodule, and I am showing you now a multinodular toxic goiter, also called as Plummer's disease. So this is how an isotope scan will help you to do a differential diagnosis of a thyrotoxicosis patient. So here again many multiple nodules are seen. Some of the nodules are cold, generalized increased uptake of the hot nodules, suppressing the rest of the thyroid gland, and there is reduced background activity also. Sometimes we come across with patients like this. Increased uptake is there, entire gland, but some cold nodules are also seen. We have to be careful in these patients. The dictum is that hyperthyroid patients need not have, will not be having a cancer or a thyroid cancer or papillary carcinoma of thyroid. But it is not so. In these patients, it is mandatory that whenever we describe a cold nodule in a hyperfunctioning gland like this, it is better to rule out a malignancy in these patients. FNAC is recommended. We should not neglect that. Another example of nodular, we call this as a nodular Graves pattern, diffuse uptake, very large thyroid gland. Cold nodules are also seen. This is a typical nodular Graves. In the Graves pattern, another variety called nodular Graves. Next comes, you will come across with the patients who come with a very short history of a thyrotoxicosis. This is maybe because of inflammatory pathology or a thyroiditis, and this is forms almost 50% of the clinical thyroid disorders in the thyroid gland. This is very common. These patients typically come to us with a very short history of a thyrotoxicosis, and it may be very subtle, it may be very difficult to identify. Usually diabetics are having a preponderance to have this. The differential diagnosis of a thyroiditis are this: chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis, subacute thyroiditis, acute suppurative thyroiditis, invasive fibrous thyroiditis, postpartum thyroiditis. We see a lot of subacute thyroiditis. We don't see frequently others. We do see a lot of postpartum postpartum thyroiditis cases also. So how to diagnose this? We would have done a blood test, the antibodies may be raised, but you want what is happening to the thyroid function, how it is seen. So this is how it is. Clinically hyperthyroid, thyroid gland is not seen at all. So this is typically seen in acute or chronic thyroiditis. There is no tracer uptake in the thyroid gland at all. So this is a classical picture of a thyroiditis, and these patients, all they need is only reassurance. You know that it may be just a temporary thyrotoxicosis, transient thyrotoxicosis. Usually they need only reassurance, or if they have very frank thyrotoxicosis symptoms, you can treat them with antithyroid drugs or Inderal, and all they need is a reassurance. And the picture, the image depends upon in which phase they present to us. By the time they see you, they may be already in the resolving phase of a thyroiditis. In that type, when they come, the T3, T4 is still high, but the thyroid uptake pattern looks almost normal. It's not like a typical Graves, and uptake is there. So the patient may be recovering from a thyroiditis. So in these cases, this picture will tell you what to do for these patients. So you are only giving them reassurance, call them for close short interval follow-up, repeated T3, T4, TSH you will be doing, and usually they may end up over a period of time as a hyperthyroid patient. So these patients need a lot of your close interval follow-ups. So here I have given you two contrasting pictures. Both are thyrotoxic. One is on the left side is a picture where there is a resolving thyroiditis. On the right side is the acute phase where there is no uptake. So just for your I have shown the images side by side, so it will help you to understand that the picture depends upon in which phase they present to you. These are the cases very rare. In my 30 years of my practice, I have seen only one case. This is a teratomatous ovarian tumor. Patient was frankly hyperthyroid, and there can be uptake in the pelvis. Thyroid also will be there, but it is usually suppressed. You can see the uptake there. Thyroid uptake is very less because somewhere else it is more production of the T3, T4, and it is suppressed. Then comes in your routine practice, you will come across most of the patients with a thyroid nodule. This is a big dilemma. What to do? If a young lady comes to you, cosmetically it is not acceptable, what to do for these patients? Or the patient may come with a frank thyrotoxicosis symptoms, what to do with these patients? Or patients is euthyroid, and but the swelling is increasing over a period of time, what to do in these patients? Will isotope scan will help? Yes, it can help. It will only tell the function of the nodule. The dictum is most of the thyroid nodules need not be malignant, but 20% of the cold nodules, that means non-functioning nodules, can be malignant. So if you are contemplating an FNAC, better to do from a cold nodule. Or you have referred the cases to us thinking that there may be a non-functioning nodule or malignancy you are suspecting, but that nodule is showing an uptake like this. So this is a warm nodule or a hot nodule. These chances of being malignant is very, very less, negligible. So just by doing an isotope scan, we can tell the probability of malignancy or no probability of malignancy. But isotope scan, in your day-to-day practice, isotope scan for diagnosing a thyroid nodule are superfluous. You would have done typically T3, T4, TSH to know the function. Patient may be euthyroid. Then what is the best alternative? How to go about it? Because as a clinician, you have a high index of suspicion for malignancy. So isotope scan will not help you. So this is where your ultrasound scan will help you. So the first investigation of a choice for in your routine practice should be an ultrasound. A Doppler, a very good sonologist, will tell you that it is a solid, hypervascular, and basically even then you have to do FNAC. But the FNAC, please remember, has to be done with the ultrasound guided only. There is no role in the current day-to-day practice blind FNAC. So you have to do FNAC because a sonologist has at his disposal, he knows that where may be a high chance of being a malignancy. So you are minimizing a sampling error. Otherwise, you keep on repeating the FNAC. So it is always recommended that when you are evaluating a thyroid nodule, please do a good ultrasound. And if you are contemplating FNAC, it should be ultrasound guided FNAC only. And if it is a cyst, you are going to aspirate and send it for a cytology. Why we are doing this? Basically to rule out malignancy. And next we will be seeing how we do a management of a thyrotoxicosis. And there can be three types of management: medical, surgical, and iodine 131. I'll briefly touch upon all these three. Drug therapy, that is neomercazole or propylthiouracil, are the commonest drugs you are going to use. So, which are the cases? Young patients, very small gland, very short history of a thyrotoxicosis, or a very mild disease, very mild borderline increase of the T3, T4. So, you please consider medical management. And permanent remission will never happen. It can be best only in 25% of the time. There can be long-term remission. Most of the time, in my clinical practice, I have seen they usually relapse. And that is what is 75% will relapse the moment you stop antithyroid drugs. So, what are the side effects of the antithyroid drugs? Rash, pruritus, and leukopenia. We do get a lot of cases which are treated with antithyroid drugs, and once they develop these complications, they are referred for iodine 131 therapy. Surgery is also an option. The permanent remission here is 85%. Please remember, you are not tackling the basic pathophysiology of the thyroid gland here. You are only reducing the volume of the thyroid gland. The remaining thyroid is always remains hyperplastic. So it is churning out always more hormone, but because you are reducing the volume of the thyroid gland, it is maybe sufficient for patient to lead a normal life. But there can be hypothyroid status in these patients, about 25% at the end of 10 years after the surgery. But the complications can be hypoparathyroidism and recurrent laryngeal nerve injury, and some patients can relapse because whatever left behind thyroid tissue can start producing more. We do see some cases who relapse after surgery also. But it has, earlier we used to do a lot of these surgeries, but with the advent of iodine 131 therapy now, the surgery has come down a lot. And let us see what is nuclear medicine role here in thyrotoxicosis treatment. We administer radioactive iodine 131. It has a beta energy of 606 kV. This is the one which damages the thyroid cells. It kills it. The cells which concentrate iodine 131, they lose their ability to replicate. So this is how it is like doing non-invasive surgery, or non-invasive procedure. Without doing a surgery, you are reducing entirely the thyroid gland bulk. And it is very easy to do. Compliance is very good. And before we do iodine 131, we need an evidence that there is iodine uptake. So we always do an iodine scan or a technetium scan. So which are the cases? Many times the patients are referred directly to a nuclear medicine specialist to do iodine 131 therapy. None of us will straight away take for iodine 131 therapy because we need an evidence to treat with iodine 131. We do a technetium scan or iodine 131 scan. If there is an uptake, we treat. If there is no uptake, we should not treat. It may be thyroiditis, and we send them back to the referring physician or a consultant. Here, I have shown you the cases where you should not treat, and if there is iodine 131 uptake is there, a technetium uptake is there, we treat. Safety profile of iodine 131. There is almost 60 years, almost 70 years worldwide experience. Earlier, there was a lot of confusion or misinformation in the general public or even among the medical fraternity that it will induce malignancy. Only the patients who are more than 40 should be treated. All these things are not true nowadays. You can treat younger patients also. And there was a fear that it will induce a second malignancy, it will induce leukemia. So all those things have been disproved now because 70 years data they have evaluated. There is no such incidence now for a second malignancy or leukemia. In fact, there is it was thought that if you treat with iodine 131, it will induce thyroid cancer. In fact, it has been disproved now with a lot of literature available for last 70 years. And the incidence of thyroid cancer is only 0.1%. Those who have been treated with iodine 131. And those who are treated with medical, that is neomercazole, it can be about 0.3%. And those who are treated with surgical, in fact, it is more, 0.5%. So you can be rest assured that it will not increase any incidence of thyroid cancer by treating with iodine 131. And there was a fear that it will induce genetical abnormality in the offsprings or their future progeny or their children or grandchildren. So all those things have been disproved now. Second generation or third generation of the patients have also been followed world over, and there is no incidence of any different malignancies in the second or third generations. So it is quite safe now. Now comes to the contraindication of administering iodine 131. So whenever a young lady comes to us in a reproductive age group, we make it sure that she is not pregnant. If she is not sure, we make sure that she will bring us the pregnancy test, and then only we administer iodine 131. And why? Because these problems can happen if it is administered before or when the conception has just happened and before 12 weeks, there are a lot of organogenesis happening, we can induce the problems for unborn child. So in pregnancy, if the patient has a thyrotoxicosis, so the current treatment will be with propylthiouracil. There is no role for iodine 131. Surgery may be done very rarely, but it is always handled by endocrinologists, and they usually manage with propylthiouracil. So what are the complications with iodine 131? The main is supposed to be hypothyroid, but today what we do is we treat the patients with making them hypothyroid. Treatment of management of a hypothyroid is very easy than the management of a thyrotoxicosis. So the patients, by the time they come to us or to any nuclear medicine specialist, they already spent 2 years or sometimes 8, 10 years also they are on neomercazole. Some of the patients would have had surgery, there is a relapse. So these patients we don't want to take any chance, because the end result of any hyperplastic disease or a thyrotoxic is always hypothyroid over a period of time. So we prepone the hypothyroid status. We treat them off late, make them hypothyroid, send them back to a referring physician, and we ask them to keep doing T3, T4, TSH once in 3 months and start on a thyroid replacement once they become hypothyroid. Because 76% of the patients whom we treat with, we calculate, we don't want to have a hypothyroid status, and a lot of studies have been done, try to give less iodine and make them use thyroid. It will not happen. So most of the patients will become hypothyroid by, 75% of them become hypothyroid by 11 years. So to avoid all these problems, most of the nuclear medicine consultants across the world now treat them to make patients hypothyroid. So don't think that it is a complication. We make the patients hypothyroid and finish the thyroid once and for all, put them on L-Droxin and forget it. Now, in your clinical scenario, these patients might come. A young lady, not yet married, presenting with a hyperthyroid status. She is about to get engaged or she is about to get married. Or a newlywed couple. Now one of the partners, either a male or a female, is found a hyperthyroid. These are the cases which we come across routinely. And the best option I would recommend now is, especially for a young lady who is about to get married, best is treat them with iodine 131 therapy, finish the thyroid, make her hypothyroid, put them on L-Droxin for rest of her life. The reason is, suppose tomorrow she will get married, she is in hyperthyroid status, it will come in the way of conception or pregnancy, or there may be having a lot of complications during pregnancy. So it is better to make them hyperthyroid. And newlywed couple, usually what happens, they usually postpone pregnancy for 2 years, 3 years, then they start evaluating why there is infertility. One of the, either a boy or a girl may be found a hyperthyroid. So these are the patients. Now again treating them with if it is a younger wife, to treat with neomercazole, she may land up with pregnancy complications. So these are the patients better to treat with iodine 131 and make them hypothyroid and start L-Roxin. Why we recommend this is to avoid complications during the pregnancy. We only ask them to avoid pregnancy for 6 months after iodine 131 is administered, because historically the data has been proven there is no increased incidence of cancer, or there is no increased incidence of any malformation, congenital malformations happening to their offsprings. So now let us come, that is what I have briefly told about the thyrotoxicosis. Now let us see how we come across and manage the thyroid cancer. So this is one of the commonest endocrinological malignancies you will come across in your day-to-day practice, because you will definitely see one or the other patients with a thyroid nodule, a palpable nodule. A high index of suspicion for use to rule out malignancy in these patients. So what will you do? As I told you initially during my presentations, you are doing thyroid scan or ultrasound, FNAC is done, and it turns out to be suspicious for malignancy, and maybe diagnosing the papillary carcinoma thyroid. And these are the patients have to undergo treatment, because this is one malignancy which is eminently curable with less complications, good quality of life. They survive for 25 to 30 years without any problem. But the first treatment should be the best treatment. So what is the recommended protocol? Surgery, total thyroidectomy. There are a lot of controversies in what type of surgery has to be done depending upon the size of the thyroid gland. I will not go into all those complications, the controversies here. I'll tell you what is routinely practiced in India. Best is to have a total thyroidectomy. After total thyroidectomy, the patients have to be off L-Roxin or thyroxine replacement. You should not start. They should be made deliberate hypothyroid status. Then usually it happens when a good surgery is done, a total thyroidectomy is done usually by 4 to 5 weeks. They are referred to a nuclear medicine center. We administer a small dose of iodine and see what is the uptake pattern in the thyroid bed, or if there are any distant metastases, then we treat them with the iodine 131 therapy. So this is what is done. So what is our goal here? This is how we see in the first image, if you see on the top left, that is how we typically see a residual thyroid tissue after a total thyroidectomy. We don't want to see it, because these patients are managed in a subsequent follow-up by a tumor marker called thyroglobulin. And it should be usually less than 10, or it should not be detected in thyroidic patients or those who have been ablated with iodine 131. And if there is some amount of a thyroid tissue left behind, it is always producing that protein, and it will always add to the confusion whether the tumor is still there or it has recurred. It will be difficult. So the best policy is to ablate whatever residual thyroid tissue is there, completely ablate. And usually thyroid cancers are multifocal. You might have received bulk of the disease, but whatever is left behind or which is difficult to remove may be harboring foci of malignancy. We don't want to leave it like that. So we want to ablate it with iodine 131. So usually we wait for 4 to 5 weeks. The TSH goes up. The TSH promotes the uptake of iodine 131. That is why we delay 4 to 5 weeks. There are synthetic TSH is also available. It's a bit expensive. I don't want to go into detail. And we can give iodine 131 and ablate it. So you can see here in the subsequent follow-up, whatever is the top left image, you can see there is an uptake, and the bottom there is no uptake in the neck. So we have accomplished our goal. we have completely ablated the residual thyroid tissue. The patient is free from the cancer, and we can subsequently every 6 months or yearly we can only keep on doing a scan or thyroglobulin assay, and if it is within the limit, you need not do anything. You can only keep giving thyroxine replacements. And an example here. Here the patient had lung metastasis. Lot of thyroid tissue is there in the neck. We are given 150 millicurie of iodine 131, and in the subsequent follow-up on the right side you can see there is a complete ablation. So with iodine 131 we can give good quality of life, and the patients can, even though they have metastasis, because the uptake is so good and it is so specific, we call it a theranostics, a diagnostics as well as a therapy in the same sitting. The uptake is so good, and only the thyroid tissue, either a metastatic functioning thyroid tissue will take up, and it gets ablated and killed completely. And on the right side you are not seeing any uptake at all. The two foci, what you are seeing is the uptake in the stomach and one in the bladder. It is not a tumor. So here we have achieved our goal. So these patients, even though they have a metastasis, they can survive for long. But it is easier said than done. The first surgery in a thyroid cancer should be the best surgery. Here in this patient, the lot of the residual thyroid tissue is left behind. Patient had a humoral metastasis. If a lot of thyroid tissue is there in the neck, whatever iodine we give, it all goes to the residual thyroid tissue only. Our intent here is to treat a metastasis also. You can see in the arrow mark, it is a humoral metastasis. There is no sufficient uptake there. So what happens, the treatment will not be good. So whenever we have a doubt, we recommend that the patient will undergo a revision surgery or completion thyroidectomy, and then we do the surgery. And many times even the chest X-ray may be normal in these patients, and when we do an iodine scan in these patients, we can see this type of extensive metastasis in the lungs. And in spite of that, this many metastasis, extensive disease, these patients can survive 10 to 25 years with iodine 131. And how we do the follow-up in these patients? Total thyroidectomy followed by iodine 131. We call the patients every 6 months. Depending upon whether it is low risk or high risk, we call them at a short interval or maybe yearly. And we keep doing iodine scans and a thyroglobulin assay. And if the thyroglobulin is going up, we call them for iodine 131 scan, and we might redo the iodine 131 therapy again. And in our subsequent follow-up, what happens? The patient is doing fine, but iodine scan is negative, but thyroglobulin is going up. That means something is wrong here. We know that there is a metastasis or a residual thyroid tissue somewhere, but it is forgotten to take up iodine 131. These patients are having poor prognosis. So these patients, we have to hunt what is happening, where is the metastasis, not by conventional isotope scans, but by doing PET scans and a different type of, we try to make those cells take up iodine 131 by lot of other means, by giving certain drugs. Chemotherapy regimens are also there, and we give certain drugs here, lenvatinib, defratinib. These are all the new drugs available, and we do like that. And these are the patients where we recommend them for PET scan. PET scan, you will never recommend for a thyroid cancer. It is not a recommendation. PET scan is usually done by a nuclear medicine physician himself or an oncosurgeon. When there is no iodine uptake, thyroglobulin is going up. At that time, we do a thyroid FDG PET scan. And because it is a slow-growing tumor, there is no FDG uptake. Glucose is not taken up in a slow-growing tumors. But in case such a slow-growing tumor shows an FDG uptake, it is a bad news for the patient. This is an example where there is the top image shows there is no uptake, but the bottom image are showing there is a lot of metastasis. This is not a good news for the patients. These patients need other means of treatment, like a chemotherapy, or sometimes radiotherapy may also be used if it is a solitary. But many times we usually see a small focus or a small nodule, in the neck, which is showing up iodine the FDG uptake. So these are the cases which we always try to see, recommend for a surgery. Take out that thing and patient will be fine. And as I told you, that FDG uptake should not be done in a thyroid cancer, and if there is an uptake here, FDG uptake in a known thyroid cancer, it is not a good news. This is a case, unfortunate patients, where their metastases are showing an FDG uptake. All those bright spots, color things, they are FDG uptake. Here is a case, even though there is a large metastasis in the vertebra also, there is no FDG uptake. In fact, this is a good news for the patient. It gives prognostic information about these patients. And in these patients, when there is no uptake, there are new tracers available called gallium dotanoate, because these are all neuroendocrine tumors. We try to see whether we can treat them by other means, because they have no other alternative. So these are the newer isotopes where we try to evaluate whether there is an uptake and use the same different tag with the different high energy isotopes and treat them. And what I told you was for well differentiated cancers, you will come across three: papillary, follicular, mixed papillary, follicular. These are the commonest malignancies you will come across. Sometimes you come across with a medullary cancer of the thyroid gland. And here again the treatment of choice is adequate surgery. You may have to do external radiotherapy, MIBG therapy, another isotope. We use it if there is an uptake. And how do you diagnose medullary carcinoma thyroid? Different PET scans are available. MIBG scan is also available. You have to consider two scans here: gallium dotanoate scan or FDG. It will show the tumor burden. And wherever it is possible, if surgery is possible, recommend surgery. If surgery is not possible, then radiotherapy is usually done. This is very rare. Anaplastic carcinoma thyroid, nothing can be done for that. Death is usually happens within 6 months. And sometimes if surgery is possible and feasible, you can do. And palliative radiotherapy is usually done. And chemotherapy is given, and usually the prognosis is not at all good in these patients. Very briefly, I'll tell about, even though I'm talking about thyroid here, hyperfunctioning parathyroid glands, because I'm talking about thyroid, I just thought that I'll include this also for your information. Hyperfunctioning parathyroid adenoma. You will come across certain patients where there is repeated nephrocalcinosis, pancreatitis, gallstones. Then you may suspect that there may be metabolic abnormality in these patients. You will do calcium assay, and if it is high, you may do a parathormone. So parathormone is high and calcium is also high, then you know that this patient may be having a parathyroid adenoma. So what is the treatment here? You have to do surgery. So how to identify a small tiny gland? There are multiple glands, and which one of those glands is hyperfunctioning? CT and MR will identify, but they will not tell which is actually the one which is functioning more. So that's why you have to consider this scan called Sestamibi scan. You can see on the top left, there are two foci here. One is, this was palpable. You could have done surgery and finished it off, but the patient wouldn't have responded to a surgery because this is non-palpable. This is also showing more uptake. So if you had done surgery only for this, your surgery would have been incomplete. The surgery would have been failure. So to identify multiple glands, or sometimes it can be ectopic. It is not seen in the expected anatomical position within thyroid gland. It can develop from, it can be anywhere from angle of mandible up to the arch of aorta. That's why you always include this much of field of view. This is in the mediastinum, you can see here. This is very difficult. It may be passed off as a lymph node, mediastinal lymph node, but here it is an uptake and the surgery will save this patient. Another example of a mediastinal parathyroid, hyperfunctioning parathyroid gland here. Sometimes these routine scans will fail to identify hyperfunctioning parathyroid glands. This is where a PET scan will come again, but it is a specialized PET scan, not a routine PET scan. Very few centers do this. It is called as choline scan. Here it is clearly identifying where it is. This was not identified in a routine scan, and this is how we are able to identify most of the hyperfunctioning parathyroid glands now, even though it is difficult to identify by CT and MR. or a conventional system AB scan. And I stop my talk here. What I have explained to or shown you is a day-to-day practice. I have not gone into a lot of controversies. These are the things where you will come across in your day-to-day practice. The commonest thing you will come across is the thyroid function disorders. They usually come to you as a hypothyroid or a hyperthyroid. If it is a hypothyroid, how isotope scan will help you basically to identify whether there is thyroidogenesis or ectopia. In infant, whether the thyroid is developed or not, because you have to start the thyroxine replacement very fast. In a hyperthyroid, your treatment differs based on what type of a hyperfunctioning gland is there. Whether it is a Graves pattern or it is a thyroiditis, multinodular toxic goiter or toxic adenoma. And in a thyroid cancer, what is to be done? The take-home message is the first surgery should be the best surgery, followed by iodine 131 and a lifelong follow-up of these patients. You should not be just one follow-up. You have to call them for life follow-up. And you will come across with repeated renal stones or gallstones or pancreatitis. Your index of suspicion is that it may be a metabolic abnormality. So you think that it may be hyperfunctioning parathyroid gland. The treatment of choice here is to avoid all these problems is only by surgery. And how to identify parathyroid gland? System AB scan is the one which will help you to minimize the surgical exploration time and also have a greater success in the surgery. Thank you.